In this video, we are going to discuss about interstellar dust hypothesis, which was put forward by Otto Smith in 1943, who was a Russian scientist. So this theory had a greater advantage because this theory solved many problems of creation of our solar system and our planets. So what were the assumptions were put forward by this theory? Solar system formed from the dust and gas particles, as there were dust and gas particles were there. These particles might have been formed from the matter which is coming out of the stars. So from the stars, the matter which is coming, so this is a star, the matter which was coming out of these particles, which were called as dark matter. Our sun during the galactic revolution captured the dark matter of the universe. The sun was going through a galactic revolution. During that time, this captured these dark matter of the universe, and they had their own angular momentum. So already these dark matter had their own angular momentum. These dark matter were called the interstellar dust. Gas particles were less and dust particles were more, and because these dust particles were more in number, and they were systematically arranged also, because the gas particles were in less density and dust particles were in more higher density, so it was capable for the dust particles to arrange systematically. Dark matter started revolving around the sun with the impact of three kinds of motion. They were rotational motion of the sun, and gravitational force exerted by the sun on the dark matter, and the angular momentum of the dark matter. These motions led to redistribution of particles. So because of this motion, these gas particles and dust particles got redistributed among themselves, depending upon the mass, density, dimension, and on the basis of centrifugal and centripetal force. Because the mass of the particles varied to one particle, or gas particles, between the gas particles and the dust particles. The centrifugal force pushed away from the sun, the centripetal force which pushed towards the sun. So because of that, they could rearrange themselves, and the intense heat of the sun dispersed the gaseous particles towards the margin, and heavy particles were left in the inner bands of the disk. Because the gaseous particles were in less which were in less density, as well as it was light also, so they were pushed away from the sun, and they were in the outer margins, and the particles which were dust particles, which were heavy particles, they were with high density, and the high mass was more, and so that they were in the center of the disk. So this is the disk. Here the gas particles were arranged, but the inner circle dust particles were arranged. Collision led to aggregation of particles, which became embryos of the future planet. So these particles started colliding among themselves, and they led to creation of embryos, small embryos, and they later aggregation, this continuous aggregation of these dust particles led to formation of big planets. Gas particles couldn't organize as they were moving continuously. Initially, embryos captured matter and grew in the size to become asteroids, and later grew into planets. So this is one of the drawback of this theory. So because many scholars criticize this assumption, because they thought the asteroids and meteors were formed from the disintegration of planets, and not from those not the planets were formed from the embryos, not the planets formed from the asteroids and meteors. Left out matter in the disk were condensed to form satellites. Inner planets were of high density, and outer planets were of lower density. So this actually the present day planet solar system has the inner planets, the terrestrial planets, with higher density, the outer planets with less density. So this and outer planets were formed by the freezing out process of the gaseous matter. because they were light, they were, the gaseous particles were light, so they were pushed towards the margins of the disk, and they were, after the freezing out process, these gaseous matter outer planets were formed. Evaluation of this theory. This theory solves all the problems about the features of the solar system, but some scholars, but what are the earlier problems it solves are near circular and similar of the solar system, similar planets of orbits of the planets. So it's somewhat circular in shape, the solar system somewhat in circular, near circular in shape, and those planets of the these orbits, and evolution in the equatorial plane of the sun closely matching with the orbital planes of the planets. Then placement of planets according to their size on the basis of well founded laws, and high density planets in the outer, so high density planets were in the outer circle of the solar system. Why high density? Then large and peculiar distribution of angular momentum among the planets of solar system. So these problems were solved by this theory, but there are some flaws actually, because later scientists couldn't accept these uh, few assumptions of these theories were the gravitational force of the primitive sun was incapable of capturing the dark matter of the universe, and meteorites and asteroids were formed from disintegration of planets, and this theory postulates assumption, this theory gives assumption as these planets were formed by integration of asteroids. Initially they say that asteroids and meteorites formed, and they aggregated some dust particles towards them. Then they led to formation of planets. But present day scientists say that meteorites and asteroids were formed from disintegration of planets, and no trace of remnants of dark matter couldn't be found till date. So these are some critics given to this theory, but this theory solves major problems of this origin of solar system.